And I assume Aaron Mannix is joining us, but maybe we'll give her a second. So maybe I should just start. Let's start the meeting. Let's call the meeting to order. And we have a lot of guests today, and so I don't want to waste anyone's time, and I want to get started. And I want to thank the guests for coming. I want to just say a preliminary note, which is Erin Duquesne chose not to run again, and so she didn't run again, and therefore she's no longer on the Board of Selectmen. And so the question becomes, can she still be on this committee? She has expressed that she wanted to be on this committee, and we'd like to have her, but I'm not sure in looking at the charter, in the way this committee was formed, what we can do. So I will look into it this 2 weeks, and I apologize. I didn't realize local government was so quick. You get elected and then boom, that's it. It's not like the presidency. And so the next day, Erin's email bounced back. So she has not been getting our emails. So I will remedy that all. Erin Mannix taught me that, First Selectman Lyons was already sworn in like the day after. So that's how it works. So, we will figure that out, but Erin is not here today. And so hopefully she will be joining us again. I'm going to leave things like the minutes and till after our speakers. And I want to just say a thank you to Rob and Jerry for joining us today. And I also want to say a hello to John, who's agreed to join us today and see how he might be able to help us, which is very much appreciated. For the developers, we in this group are thinking a lot, obviously, about affordable housing. And obviously, we are charged with making a plan at the end of the day, a plan for how to develop affordable housing. And we've been thinking a lot about different ways of doing housing. And we've also been reading different people's plans. But we were really interested in hearing a developer's perspective on when you develop anything, what are you thinking about? What is the bottom line? What are the things that this committee should be considering? So I really thank you for coming today. And I think if I'm right before you, I think Peter, you maybe wanted to introduce Rob, and I'm happy to share if you want. Yes, please go ahead.
Well, yeah, first of all, Rob, thanks a lot for joining us. Just to share with the group, Rob's been with the Caleb Foundation since 2004, and he is the director of acquisition, so we have the right guy here. Caleb was founded in 1992 and is a developer of affordable housing throughout the Northeast. They own and manage upwards of 2,000 apartments and townhomes in the Northeast, so quite a presence. They have 3 communities in Connecticut right now, and they're the majority partner in the new affordable housing project that's being built in Madison called the Wellington, which is down on the east side of town near Cohen's. So excited that they're here. They're joining the Hope Partnership to build that. I think it'll be a great project. And Rob, again, just thanks for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. And I don't have as beautiful an introduction of you, Jerry, but Jerry has such an interesting background in that he didn't start really in housing at all, right? I mean, he started producing plays and movies in Hollywood. And when you read his bio, it's really amazing. I think I knew Jerry for a little while before I ever looked at his bio. And I mean, working on Toy Story, to me, that's all I need to know about you. You're a big hero in this house. So, but Jerry now is, he's born and raised in Madison, correct? And now back in Madison, and has, parents who were very active in Madison. And now he is taking over the Davis Realty Group. And so Jerry is in the process of right now building condos. You probably have all passed it on, is it Railroad Avenue? Oh, Bradley, right?
Bradley.
Yeah.
Bradley Road.
And so I appreciate Jerry's perspective as a mostly for-profit developer to hear, what do you need to build in the town of Madison? And so that's why I invited him here today. So with that, I'm wondering, Rob and Jerry, do you each want to just take a few minutes and just sort of give a little synopsis of what what you're building, and then maybe we could ask you some questions.
Would you like to start, Jerry, or would you like me to?
Sure. Sarah, I appreciate the background, because I look at that as a caveat to anything I say, because I'm very much a student of this, the housing industry, by no means an expert. I've been at it for, I guess, about 10 years, but only full-time here for the last 7. And I keep learning. When I took this over from my parents, the main portfolio had been the Clippership Row apartments, which are, on the Boston Post Road, and a few commercial buildings. And in 2009, we had the opportunity to acquire the property on Bradley Road, which was where the Tux's Laundromat was. And most of my graduate school education has been trying to figure out what to do with that property over the last 12 years, which has been a roundabout route, to say the least. But we are finally moving it forward, and it's actually rental apartments. It's not condos, and it'll have 30 units, 30 rental units, 1- and 2-bedroom apartments on Bradley Road. And I guess I should just add, so we have apartments, and then, in terms of, we have some commercial buildings, so that we're fortunate enough to be able to have a mix of, like Jaime as a tenant of ours, and notably the movie theater is a tenant of ours, which is always exciting. Particularly exciting now because we're trying to reopen it hopefully next month. Over to you, Rob.
I was going to say, we're all excited about that movie theater opening.
Sure are.
Some of us are waiting to go on opening day, so.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm afraid my resume is a little bland compared to Jerry's. That sounds like quite an eclectic background there, Jerry. As Peter mentioned, I'm the Director of Acquisitions at the Caleb Foundation. We're a nonprofit affordable housing developer that's been around about 30 years. We have a generally broad geographical footprint. We have a presence in Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine, and Massachusetts, which is an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is that as the funding ebb and flows with the different states, we can move from state to state and focus our efforts in different states. The disadvantage is that we don't have the footprint that we might have in a certain region. So when we come into a community such as Madison, it's critical that we have a partner on site, or we have an advocacy group on site. There is a natural resentment when people come in from the outside and start telling any community or start preaching to any community about the need for affordable housing. So it's really priceless or extremely valuable to us to have a local group in the area that had been chipping away at the need for affordable housing, that serves as a natural constituency, that is willing to advocate amongst their friends and neighbors for the need for affordable housing. And in this particular case, we are fortunate enough to partner with Hope, which has been doing some great work down on the Seacoast, and really has been of invaluable help in trying to address all the obstacles that come up as we move forward. I think it might be worthwhile to let Jerry probably would talk about the more conventional obstacles with developing real estate, such as neighborhood concerns about traffic, et cetera. So perhaps I could focus on the affordable housing specific issues. as I mentioned, the main obstacle is that it's absolutely critical that you partner with some group of influence in town. We're much more effective, if we have found that we're much more effective when we're working with the town to try to solve an issue for the town, and it varies for, or cities, and it varies from situation to situation. For instance, we've done a couple of environmentally contaminated sites that the town had taken back in a tax foreclosure that was just sitting there, and it's an eyesore for kids and an attractive nuisance for kids to get in there and get high and start fires and generally cause commotion. And in that particular case, we were able to solve a problem for the town in that we developed this eyesore and get this eyesore back on the tax rolls. So many times when we found that it's unusual to have a community that embraces affordable housing. We have to sweeten the pot somehow by helping them address issues that exist in the town. Whether another example is up here in Massachusetts, there's a state law known as 40B, which mandates that if you have less than 10% of your housing defined as affordable, the local zoning approval is ceded to the state. So the state approves. So theoretically, you could have a skyscraper on the piece of property next door if the wrong developer came in. Until you reach 10% affordability threshold, then the zoning control reverts back to the state. In the town that we're partnering with, their affordability factor was about 9%. So we help them address a need. I hope that doesn't sound too cynical, but they had a need, and there was support for affordable housing, for the need for affordable housing. So it was really a win-win for them. But the primary obstacle with in building affordable housing, and many times I realize for-profit groups get involved with affordable housing, but many times it's nonprofits that are smaller organizations that might be poorly funded. So the greater obstacle, as with any real estate, is financing. And it's more pronounced on the affordable housing piece because many times it's these projects are put forward by well-intended folks who might not have the deep pockets that a for-profit group might have. So the financing takes the two primary components. One is the permanent financing to build this piece of property, these 20, 30, 40 units, whatever you're looking to do. But an under-recognized obstacle is the pre-development costs associated with it. It's enormously expensive to develop real estate and to engage the third-party experts that you need to develop a piece of property, such as the engineers, the surveys, the attorneys, the architects, et cetera. It costs a lot of money. There's a lot of upfront money, and there are no guarantees that you'll ever be funded. I should mention that the primary funding mechanism, or the sole funding mechanism for affordable housing in this day and age, are low-income housing tax credits. I'm not sure. I assume you folks have come across that vehicle, and that program is administered by CHFA. And as to apply for that funding, you have to. It's in a competitive round once a year, and there's quite an exhaustive application that needs to be put together that requires somebody spending upwards of $500,000 to put the documents together, with between the architect, construction drawings, and the legal work to get the site under control and to work with the local zoning authorities, et cetera. So financing is an enormous problem in any real estate development, but it's even a more heightened problem or challenge for affordable housing. I don't know if that's too much information, not enough information. Is that along the lines of what you're looking for from me this morning?
That's really helpful, Rob. I mean, my impression of affordable housing has always been that you in essence almost have to overfund the projects because you're selling tax credits. That's soft dollars to a certain extent, and so it might cost you 10 million, but you might need to raise 12 or 13 just to get the thing going. And you're right. A lot of it is driven by tax credits and CHFA and other organizations that provide credits for corporations to buy. It's amazing. It's an amazing hodgepodge that gets put together to actually make that thing come. And then you might have, at the end of the day, a very small permanent loan relative to the total cost of the project.
And that's the secret to the program, frankly, Peter, that the rent can only support a certain amount of debt. If our goal is to keep rents affordable for single moms with 2 kids working at Walmart, for instance, we have to drive the permanent debt down, and we do that through the tax credit program. And at a high level, it's a competitive program. CHFA administers, tax credits are awarded to the projects that meet that serve the broadest need. And we actually sell these credits through a syndicated to an investor who has need for the tax credit. And those millions of dollars, I'm sorry, a big crow just landed on my window up there. Those millions of dollars are brought in during the construction phase. So the construction expense isn't taken out by permanent debt, it's taken out by these tax credits, and we're able to keep our debt low and consequently keep our rents low or affordable.
Rob, may I ask, and maybe this is not a question for you, but given a town like Madison, where the market rate rents or even ownership could be quite lucrative, is there ever a way for the market rate units to help with more of that burden, even though I understand the burden's in the beginning? But let's say, and maybe you only do rental. Is there ever a way to do a sale, to do condos, that kind of a thing? Or is it more like college tuition, and the college tuition doesn't really even begin to pay for the college?
I can tell how old your kids are. If you think
they're not that old yet, but I have a lot of people who work in higher education, and I know that college tuition is crazy, and yet it doesn't pay for colleges. So.
There's some flexibility in the programs that are designed. We were involved in a project that had affordable condos for sale, and that's structured to help with the cash flow that goes into the soup of funding programs that Peter alluded to earlier. So in addition to LIHTC, and Department of Housing is very generous with their funding, and affordable housing program from Federal Home Loan Bank and Home and CDBG. There might be sales proceeds of ownership affordable units. So it's the same concept, except that the properties are sold and then the money's put back in to help, depending on how you structure it, either to pay off the debt or to help with the development of the rental unit. So there can be there can be an ownership entity. There also can be market rate units within a larger rental property. For instance, Wellington Madison has I'm sorry, I'm having deal blur here. I think, it has a small component of market rate units, and that helps fund the other units. That just helps subsidize the deeper subsidized units. The units affordable to individuals earning at 30% of area median income, 50% of area median income, and 60% of AMI.
I guess I'm asking sort of, maybe this is being naive, is there ever a situation that you could imagine where the market rate units or what you could earn off perhaps selling some units would ever make it so that you could develop affordable housing without some of these other things that we're talking about, or no?
Yes, no, it can be done. It could be done. It would be a little more complicated because the bankers would be a little anxious. In this market, it's not as complicated. The bankers or funders like committed sources of funding. And if it's a speculative source, i.e., well, we're going to sell these condos over here and use that money to put it into this project, it makes them a little nervous. Now, devil's in the details. In this market, I would think they'd be a heck of a lot more comfortable. 10 years ago during the Great Recession, I think you'd have a hard sales pitch, but yes, it can be done. My understanding.
It's making me think we should build right this very second. And Jerry, maybe that leads to you, because you seem to be building at just the right time. And I'm wondering, sort of the same question for you, because as a for-profit developer, what would you need to do to pay for the affordable housing units? And also so that it doesn't swallow the affordable housing. I know that we sometimes have, these big developments, and there are 2 or 3 affordable housing units. And so obviously that's not what we're looking to do.
Well, I think Rob illustrates one of the, very well illustrates the obstacle for me, which is the complexity of dealing with all the various kinds of financial and loan assistance and government programs that are required to make something like that possible. And he has vast experience in it, and I had a couple meetings with it with a couple developers about it, and I just was overwhelmed, frankly, by what it would take. And I would also, we come at it from a different point of view. So in our evolution of our project, we didn't start off expecting to do housing on that site. It was a possibility early on. We looked at office and we looked at medical. We looked at what other ways you could develop the Bradley Road site, and we hit a lot of dead ends. A lot of that is driven, as you probably know, by the fact that we're all on septic in Madison. So a lot of uses are just impractical on a site like that. And then secondly, there was a Department of Health limit of 5,000 gallons per day per site, which limited density. That fortunately changed in 2018. And they actually lifted the limit for the septic flow on our site, which suddenly, made housing a bit more possible to conceive of on that site. The other thing that helped a lot was Madison's tax incentive program. So we started down the path of housing at that point. But I should say that, my perspective is different from yours, because you're looking at the town and what the town inventory is. When I look at our business and what our business looks like, before I talked about the fact that we have diversity because we have apartments and we have commercial buildings. And so, what I've observed is that even though we're all just in Madison, that diversity of product has given us comfort in tough times. For example, in the Great Recession, our commercial business was terrible, but fortunately people's, our rentals were okay. And sometimes it's gone the other way. When I was looking at the possibility of doing apartments on Bradley Road, the fact is that our apartments at Clippership Row aren't called affordable, but they are basically affordable. We have about 48 units on Clippership Row, and these are older buildings. The first building was built in '78, and there's a couple converted older buildings. But our rents, I think our lowest rent is around 900, and our highest rents are maybe in the 1600s. So, and we have a vast number of people who are at the lower end of that range. So we already have a pretty low cost product that we are providing in Madison, in downtown Madison, near the train station, near shopping and everything. So for me, it made very little business sense, first of all, to do more of that same kind of product at the Bradley down the street. And it made sense to have to come up with something that was a different kind of a product that's slightly more upscale, that has an elevator and it has more amenities, because that is an underserved market in this area. And so, that's kind of my thought process when we were conceiving this. And then to get back to what Rob was saying, the fact is, once you start looking at for example, the pre-development costs were, huge. So, you're putting all this at risk. And then the actual, cost to build is astronomical. It was astronomical 2 years ago when we had the first version of these plans. It's certainly gotten much more astronomical this year because of supply chain stuff and the cost of lumber and all that stuff. So, the biggest challenge for me that I'm going to face in a year's time is making sure that we can cover our debt service based on our market rents. We happen to be lucky in that, we have other apartments. And so, we can kind of look at it in terms of our business as a whole. And, the banks, not insignificantly, the banks are looking at us as our business as a whole. I mean, we're putting everything on the line for the banks to make them feel comfortable, because it is so difficult to pencil out the cost of construction versus market rate rents. And just the last thing I'll say is, what are market rate rents around here? Well, we're not in Fairfield County, where, you can assume people will pay easily double to triple what somebody will pay here for a 2-bedroom apartment. We haven't set our prices yet. I'm kind of assuming, a certain kind of projecting, a certain price range. But we are still, a relatively low cost market for rentals. And as such, it's a pretty scary proposition. Hopefully the banks are comfortable enough to go along with this. I hope that answers your question, Sarah.
It doesn't. I have others, but I want to open it up to the group. Do people have questions that they'd like to ask?
What are some of the factors that would make a site interesting to work with or favorable to work with?
Well, from my perspective, or any perspective, I guess, on a developer, certainly the zoning's an issue. If it's the right zoning, that's a good step in the right direction. The costs associated with building out the site. We're working on a property now that has a high water table. We're penciling out spending almost 7 figures trying to address the site's needs. The location is critical in any real estate project. What else am I missing, Jerry? Is there something else that you look for?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's site characteristics are just huge, because, as you say, if there's remediation to be done or other kinds of issues with flood zones and stuff, it's a major thing. But look, people want to be close to town, close to transportation. I think those are values. I think.
Could you comment on lot size by any chance?
Well, interestingly here, the DPH limit of 7,500 gallons per day applies to a single lot, but you could have 100 acres and it would be 7,500 gallons per day. So it's kind of unintuitive, although I guess, in a case like that, you can subdivide a lot and, multiply your septic flow. But then you also have to deal with parking and, setbacks and things like that with any site. So, for example, with our site, we are extremely crowded at the Bradley with providing the required parking and all the underground utilities are cheek by jowl, to deal with setbacks. Water lines have to be set back from gas lines and power lines, and stormwater lines have to be set back, and everything has to be separated by code.
Jerry, can you just say 7,500 gallons? I'm not familiar with. What would that translate to in terms of bedroom? It goes by bedrooms, right?
Oh, Erica, I'm at a meeting.
Yeah, so it's for residential, it's different from commercial. For residential, it's the code is 150 gallons per day per bedroom.
50
So
bedrooms.
yeah, so it translates to 50 bedrooms.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Jerry, this sounds very difficult. You make it sound very difficult, challenging. I say I don't know a ton about it, but what role does the low-income housing tax credit play in terms of incentivizing? I think, Rob, you talked about mixed use at market and then low income. rates within, one development. How does that work? And, both Jerry and Rob, when you conceptualize what it is you want to build, and if that does in fact, does including low income units, mixed units, factor in because of the low income housing tax credit?
Yes, from my perspective, my field is chasing the points in the qualified allocation plan. Qualified allocation plan is the plan that each state puts together, which defines how the LIHTC funds will be administered and distributed. And in that document, there's quite a detailed listing. Okay, you'll get 3 points for this, you'll get 4 points for that, and a diversity of rent levels is something that earns a couple points in the qualified allocation plan. So one of the critical things for a group that is solely exists to build affordable housing would be to, one of the first things we do besides looking at the property and talking to the town is to assess how it lines up with the qualified allocation plan. And not to find a point on it, but we spend an awful lot of time trying to marry the project to what is rewarded in the qualified allocation plan, because the highest score gets funded, awarded the credits, and can do the program, or do the project. So the qualified allocation plan rewards diversity of rental structures, and we'll pursue those points to the extent we can. So it's quite a strong incentive.
Right. And that's federal and state combination, is that correct?
That's an IRS program that's administered at the state level.
At the state level.
So it's a federal program, there's a federal taxes. Now, different states also have their own credit, but the low-income housing tax credit, it's an IRS program administered by the statewide local housing authority, statewide housing authority.
Rob, I was going to add something to what you just said. When you think about the application for the qualified allocation plan, one of the questions right now is, does your town have an affordable housing plan? And it's worth 3 points. So, I mean, and right now, as the Wellington goes through that, that's obviously a question. We don't have a plan yet, but that everybody that applies, at least in Connecticut, has to be able to answer that question. Does your town have an affordable housing plan?
And that's a critical component, as I mentioned earlier, and that's the local folks doing the good work at the ground level, and then we can come in and fulfill the need there. But the difference between the funded programs and the non-funded programs every year is just a point or two. So you might say, 3 points. What difference does that make? But it's literally the difference between being awarded a multi-million-dollar funding package and not being awarded and having to seek other funding.
It sounds like that's something we should educate ourselves about, just knowing the factors. Sorry, I have some dogs who are making a lot of noise here. Knowing the factors in there, because I don't today know what would be in the qualified allocation plan, and it sounds like you're sort of an expert in it. Is it something that I'm sure we could Google, but is there like a list that we could all familiarize ourselves with?
Absolutely. CHFA on their website, it'll be an easy link over to the qualified allocation plan. There are a lot of words in there because they have to meet IRS requirements. But if you look in the meat of the plan, it spells it out very clearly so that everybody can understand it. If you do this, you'll get 3 points. If you do that, you'll get 2 points. Energy efficiency, that type of thing, is rewarded. So it's quite detailed in the listing of the points that are awarded.
I can imagine. And I guess it makes me wonder for, for-profit developers. I understand that, there is money to get, but what Jerry's saying, I think, is, you have to pay a consultant a hefty fee to figure out how to get the money. Is that sort of right? And do you feel like nonprofit developers either already have those consultants in place, or they know how to get these things a little bit better?
Well, I think there are two factors at play, as I understand it. One is the familiarity with the program. We have quite a capable consultant on our project, even though Caleb has been doing this for 30 years. There are so many nuances from each state and in each application. And it's, the consultants tend to get their phone calls returned quicker than somebody coming from the outside. So there is real value, even though they're quite expensive, the good one, just like anything else, in having a consultant. But it's also the structure of the deals that my understanding sometimes for-profit groups shy away from. there'll be a permanent deed restriction on the units that are identified, and that limits the value going forward, even after the 15-year compliance period when the tax credits are paid off and the original developer can structure it so that we can get complete control of the property. There are extended use restrictions off to, some states it's 99 years in permanency. So, and that clearly impacts the value of their investment later on. And that's kind of a disincentive for many investors also. But it's primarily the upfront cost. It's very competitive. You have to jump through a lot of hoops. It's just like any scarce public funding. There's a lot of amending what you want to do to what's expected by the funders in this with tax credits.
If I might, a question I think probably more for Jerry. Obviously, local zoning, you guys both pointed out, is a critical thing. One thing that a number of municipalities that are developing their affordable housing plans are considering is inclusionary zoning, which is Section 8-2I of the Connecticut General Statutes that allows communities to essentially require a minimum percentage of larger development projects be set aside as affordable, or in lieu of that, to pay into some sort of housing trust fund at the local level. I guess the question would be, have you guys looked at that at all from a potential pro forma standpoint, and at what extent, if it was 10% of units, would that still enable a project to go forward? If it was 15%, would that kill a project? Have you guys looked at the sort of the balance between a required set aside? Obviously, Rob's situation is a little bit different because they deal in the affordable housing realm specifically. But for a market rate development, if the town were to impose essentially an inclusionary requirement, at what level might that begin to seriously impact your ability to develop in town?
Good question.
Well, we didn't look at that for the Bradley, except to the extent when we began to understand what the construction costs were going to be. The challenge in our pro formas of trying to make the numbers work. We're so profound that I think any reduction in our on the revenue side would be really difficult, and I don't think, and Rob would know much better than I, that the tax credits would kind of equal that out. However, I think that is an area that I'm very interested in for future projects, but projects that have kind of a lower cost of construction. I mean, the Bradley is it's a sprinklered elevator building, just putting the land costs aside, just the cost of constructing a building like that under current code and current construction cost is just gigantic. I think that for another kind of project, and I know there's a couple that they're being discussed, like on Scotland Road, I guess, where you're doing smaller units with simpler construction. I think that's really interesting, and that's something that I want to look at in the future, because we have another property in Copps Road that I want to kind of explore, and that's maybe a place where that could apply.
Jerry and I recognize would probably be on different sides of the fence on this particular topic, but I live in Massachusetts, and I'm on the Affordable Housing Committee in my town, and I also sit on the Affordable Housing Trust. And we have found that an inclusionary zoning requirement that provides funds in lieu of building, some of the programs offer a cash payment to be used to build affordable housing, really funnels well, or really complements what's necessary for an affordable housing project. I had mentioned how important local support is. not only at a theoretical level, but at a dollars and cents level. If the town was able to invest some money in the project up front, it really helps with the scoring, and it also speaks to the commitment from the town for affordable housing. Madison has been wonderfully helpful with helping us with the long-term property tax position on our property, and that's a critical component for the public funders. It really speaks to the support that the project has with the town. So from a nonprofit affordable housing developer, this type of local funding really, from a pure dollars and cents, it also helps with the funding, but it also speaks to a broader, stronger commitment. And thirdly, it also many times it's rewarded with scoring in the QAP. I mentioned before that these the funders like monies coming into these projects outside of their own pockets. They really reward that well.
I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that, to how do you get a town or, how do you get people on your side when you're building affordable housing? So far I've heard you say eyesores or developing a problem in the neighborhood. And I think that's very well said. And I'm just wondering if you can speak more to, when you came into Madison, how did you get people to support that project, or in other places, what are the things you've done?
For the components, and just to be clear, not all of our communities, our projects are in damaged properties, but it was an observation I made.
I was just trying to make a list of some of the things you
Right,
said.
right.
One of the things was I thought, find a need, and I get that. And the other was the law. So of course we have the law on our side with the 10% affordable
Right.
housing developer could come in and, but I'm just wondering if you have other thoughts on that.
Right. And the point I was trying to make, and you certainly captured it well, was that many times, in addition to all the typical real estate development concerns, traffic, educating all those little kids, et cetera, there's a NIMBY factor. There's a not in my backyard it would rarely be spoken, but it's implied behind the scenes that people are concerned. And people are concerned about change, and it's understandable. And any change is a little alarming to people. And there's an unknown factor there that causes people, even the best intended people, to pause and think about this property. So many times we found that we have to kind of sweeten the pot. We have to come up with an explanation that makes that kind of goes above and beyond some of what the other developers might have to do. Another component or another factor that sometimes plays well or helps the community understand how an affordable housing community would work would be an existing community in a neighboring town. Hope has been down in the area for years, and they've done a couple of lovely projects in neighboring or budding communities that we could point to that, look, this is how it works. This is a successful community. We're providing a diversity of housing. And there aren't any additional concerns that arise from servicing this component of clients as opposed to a different component of clients. So it really varies from town to town. But the point I was trying to make is that there's a implied additional hurdle that affordable housing has to. In many communities, that's not the case in Madison. It's been very welcoming. But in many communities, there's an implied additional hurdle that we have to be aware of and we have to try to address and use whatever factors are at our disposal to help them address their concerns. I'm not sure it answered your questions.
No, that was very helpful. And
succinctly there, but yeah.
And now my pause is just to see, does anyone else have some questions or final questions? Because well, I'll take one more, which is just from the for-profit standpoint, Jerry, and actually, I mean, either side, I hear you talking about, everything that goes into this. If a town could support you in doing some of the, red tape beforehand, could you envision doing a project that way? Or do you think, like if the town supplied the consultant who's going to help get a grant, if you worked would that be something that would be appealing? Or the thought of doing that kind of project together, is that just not something that you think would be of interest either to you or other for-profit developers?
Well, speaking for myself, I think that sounds great. I think the single biggest obstacle for me has been navigating all of this stuff, and I'm somewhat gratified that Rob also uses a consultant to get through the thicket. So if that help came through the town, that would be, I think, really interesting.
That's actually a really good question, Sarah, because I was thinking that my tax credit question was kind of getting at that same question. What could be done to make it as easy as possible, or the easiest way possible, in order for for-profit developers to bring that kind of mixed-use, low-cost housing into town? And that's a really interesting way to think about it for us, I think. So anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, I say it as a very limited experience in this, but being on the board of Concord Meadows, watching, how you get a grant, you have to pay a lot of money to get a grant, and those consultants are worth every penny because you wouldn't get it without them. So, so something to think about. Okay, does anyone have any last questions? Or Zoom is so hard, especially without reading glasses. But so I just want to say thank you to you both for coming in this morning. You really have helped. You've helped me a lot. I think you've helped this group a lot. We're learning as we go along. This year is forming a plan, and we will have a plan by June. But I think our goal is not just to have a plan, but to have a plan that makes some sense for Madison, so that we can actually create some housing that makes sense for Madison. And so this is getting us one step, I think, a little bit further down the line. And so we really appreciate you coming in and taking your time. And something tells me we'll be following up with questions in the future.
Please do. I'm happy to serve as an informal resource. Peter knows how to get in touch with me. And if you need to sounded off a affordable housing person, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Take care, folks.
Thank you.
Nice meeting everyone.
Bye.
My
Take care.
pleasure. Thank you.
Bye. Jerry.
Bye, Jerry.
Okay, so I did think that was very helpful, and I'm aware of the time. I'm going to try to keep us on schedule, even though I know it looks like we've got a lot left to do. Before we go any further, I don't know if anyone has any comments or thoughts that they want to share. Take that as
That was really helpful. I've learned a lot in that 45-minute period. That was illuminating for sure.
yeah. Go ahead, John. Yeah.
So, and I mean, not to jump ahead, because we actually hadn't really sort of discussed what assistance I'm going to provide with this group, but I would suggest when you move forward and get a little farther down the line when it comes to specific suggestions or recommendations, it would be worth circling back, because I think some of them are going to be zoning tweaks, and maybe along the lines of inclusionary zoning, or minimum set asides, or reforms to the approval process. It would be good to circle back with those guys, have them take a look at the draft recommendations and kind of ground truth on how it may affect their interest and ability to continue to develop in town.
I think that's a very good point. And I do want to say that I think that makes good sense. And also we would open it up to others. Certainly this group doesn't want to just, limit it to a few developers, but this is just the start of hearing from developers what they need, so we understand the process a little bit more, because none of us are developers. I do think the zoning piece is so critical, and I know that we've talked a little about it. I do want to introduce John, but I welcome this group to think about, and maybe it's Peter or Aaron or maybe John, that you have suggestions of people who could speak to us. And, as a housing lawyer, I have some background on some of this, zoning, but I think it would really help us to know like what our current zoning is. I mean, we've heard things floating around Connecticut and different ideas, but I think it would help this group to just have a short presentation on what are different people doing with the zoning. And I don't know who's the most capable to do that. But before we do any of that, maybe Aaron, would you like to introduce John, who's already done a good job of introducing himself and what he can offer here?
Sure, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Sarah. John Guskowski is a planner. He was our interim planner for the town when Dave Anderson resigned from his position. I think I briefly discussed, and John can speak to his company and what he's been up to across the state. He's almost in every town here at this point. Has a planning and consulting firm, Tyke Plan, and John has been working on affordable housing regulations, draft plans with various municipalities. We do have John services here with the town, and we're happy to steer his consulting efforts towards our committee to help us draft our plan. Go ahead, John. You can probably
So yeah,
tell us a little more about yourself.
Thanks, Aaron. And basically, Sarah, the answer to your question about who's the best person to speak to zoning in Madison, the answer is Aaron. And I think part of a good planning process for this affordable housing plan would be to sort of do that audit of not only zoning regulations, but subdivision and maybe some public improvement standards or other ordinances that has some impact, positive or negative, on the ability of developers or the town to add more housing units. So I think an audit should be part of this plan. Just to very briefly follow up on what Aaron was saying. Yeah, I am a private planning consultant, but probably 95% of my work is with municipalities and for municipalities. My partner or my firm and I are sort of embedded in a dozen municipalities serving as planning, zoning, economic development, wetlands staff. And I currently, in the area serve as Clinton, Essex, Chester, Deep River planning and zoning staff. We wrote the affordable housing plan for Old Saybrook recently that was approved. We wrote an affordable housing plan for Woodbury, are writing plans for Avon, Durham, Middlefield, and half a dozen other communities. So we've been very, very active in this affordable housing space. And then locally, obviously, I did help bridge the gap between Dave Anderson and Aaron. But just prior to that was also involved in the Ledges project, which, for better or for worse, helped that process move forward. So that's a little bit about me, but I've seen what a number of other communities are doing with their affordable housing plans, and can definitely sort of help, insofar as the town is interested, moving us, down the line with draft, sections of documents, regulatory audits, stuff like that.
Thank you, John. And thank you for joining us. So I see this is the time where a lot of people are saying they need to go, and I understand. I do as well. So let's do this if we could very quickly, if we could just approve the minutes. If anyone had time to read it between midnight and now. I see Peter shaking his head. Or do people feel, did I get it right? Who was there? That was the only thing I was not. We were all here last time, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's what I thought. And so, but I hadn't written down who was there. I had written other things. So do I have a motion to?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Peter. And a second?
Second.
I think that is literally how it always goes. So thank you very much. All in favor? Yeah, thank you. Any opposed? So we will approve these minutes. Just, we have future steps. Just a reminder, we have the upcoming educational forum. I don't think we need to talk about that more today. I did want to just ask Matt before you jump off, did you and Wendy and Andrea, although have a chance to meet and discuss the survey? And
Yeah, we have.
okay, so maybe Wendy or Andrea can speak to us on what the next steps are for us.
Okay. All right, I got to rock, guys. I really got to go. Thank you very much, as always. Sure.
Wendy or Andrea, do you want to just tell us briefly where we are? And Wendy, you're muted. Wendy, we can't hear you. You have to unmute.
Wendy, you're muted.
She might be saying she's trying to unmute, I think. I'm getting good at reading lips.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Matt had us look at the plan the survey that he had written, and Andrea and I, we agreed, I believe, Andrea, you can speak up if you didn't, that we thought it was very well done with maybe one or two little changes. But the thing that we wondered about was whether it would be more beneficial if we could see the results of the other survey before we then introduce this one and on top of that one. So that was kind of where we left it. We liked the one that he had because there's more of an opportunity for people to express what they're thinking rather than just checking off. And as far as that goes, do you have any clue on when we're going to get to see the results of the other survey? The one that went out?
I appreciate that. I have no clue. I'm wondering, Heather, if you have a clue. Heather and I have both asked. So I think I appreciate that you all met and you went over this survey, and I appreciate that we do need the survey results. And as I said, since a fully like a quarter of the results are Madison residents, I think they will inform our decision, even though there's like 15 or whatever towns involved. So I think Heather and I maybe will work to push Eugene and the consultant to just give us preliminary results. It was a Survey Monkey, so presumably it's like when you take the bar and it's a fill in and they say, we'll tell you in 5 months. You wonder, what are you doing at it? So let's see if we can ask them to at least give us the results of what they could give us. And then I think we would obviously share it with this whole group, but then maybe Wendy and Andrea and Matt will meet once again, and then we could finalize the survey next time. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. Yeah, because if we had to make any more changes or add anything to the survey that Matt has already written. So
okay.
that sounds good.
Okay. So with that, I think we've probably come to the end. I wonder if people would be interested in next time hearing from Aaron about zoning in the idea of there's no time like the present. I mean, does that sound?
That'd be great. That would be wonderful.
Not to put you on the spot, Aaron, but it sounds like you have that expertise right now in your head and maybe don't need a formal presentation, but just, yes.
Sure, I'm happy to share what we have for our current affordable housing regulations, what other multifamily regulations, things of the like, and we'll start getting all of that information together for you. I'm also, I'll share that with John as well. And I think I need to share with John the draft survey also, so that he can have, and perhaps he may have a suggestion or two to add to that as well for the committee for the next meeting.
Okay, so thank you for doing that. I will say it's instructive to me that John is actually doing the plan for several towns that are in SCROG. And so that signals to me that others are feeling like, you know, this makes sense to do a separate plan. And John, we've all read Essex and Old Saybrook, correct? No, I read Old Saybrook.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe they're a different cog.
I mean, Essex and Old Saybrook are in River Cog, but
no, I mean to say,
yeah.
no, I heard you say Woodbury. I mean to say that, oh, Woodbury, not Woodbury.
not Woodbridge. Yeah, not Woodbridge.
You know what, my mind went to Woodbury. So
They have very different ideas.
So you aren't doing the plan yet for anyone in the SCROG?
I'm not, no, but I will tell you that River Cog, which is the cog just to your east, is doing a regional plan also. But a number of those communities, Durham, Middlefield, Old Saybrook, Essex, have opted to write their own plans and,
Got
independent of the regional
it.
plan as well.
And so I didn't say that Essex and Old Saybrook were in our cog. I meant to say that.
Spiritually, they are.
No, I just meant to say that we've read those plans, so we know your plan. So there were two separate thoughts. One was I thought you were ready, and two was we've read some of your plans and know them to be good. I just one last follow up to that. Then who did do the river cog? Who did that?
It's in process right now. So
Who's the consultant?
The primary consultant is SLR, which was formerly Malone and McBroom. But actually my firm is a sub-consultant to that. So we are working on it, and we're actually going to write the sort of the municipal annex, like the municipal detail for 5 different towns.
Got it. That's helpful.
So we're working on it.
Okay. Okay, so
All right.
before
We've got a
adjourn,
plan.
did I miss anything, or are we good?
I think
Okay, then I think we should adjourn. Thank you to Peter for inviting the Caleb group. Thank you. That was really very helpful, and to all of you for suggesting that. And I will see you all in 2 weeks.
okay.
Good weekend. Good Thanksgiving.